Hello, AP Psychology students. Welcome to class today. I am not here. You are watching this video on your own, hopefully, if you are following directions here or with maybe a partner sitting next to you. Either way, what the plan is here is I'm going to just give you a quick insight into today's objectives. I'm going to go through the notes that I would have covered had I been here, and then you are going to get the rest of class time to work on an assignment. So let me start by talking about that assignment. This is posted in Google Classroom. You guys have access to it at this point. It's called IQ Test Reflection and Questions. In short, what you're going to be doing here is you are going to be taking one of two different IQ tests. There's a shorter and a longer version, your choice of what you want to do. The shorter version is a little bit less accurate, in my opinion, compared to the longer version. But the long version is longer, so you have to make the decision that best fits you. Both of them you could probably get done within the duration of this time frame, but I'll leave that up to your discretion. And then there's a couple questions that follow about how it went for you today, and how that IQ test went. Remember, as you take this, when you get to it, keep in mind these are not considered valid tests in the idea that they are going to be definitely telling you something about your IQ, your intelligence level. I'm doing this more as a demonstration to get you a sense of what's on the IQ test. And you'll get a score, but how you feel about that score, don't put too much weight into it. Unless, of course, you get a great score, then you can brag to your friends. But, if you get a poor score and or you get a score that you're not really sure what to think of, don't put too much weight into it. There's a couple other questions that also go with the backside of this worksheet here. There's a page from your reading of your textbook, page 535. If you'd rather crack open one of the textbooks that's in the classroom and find page 535, that's up to you. So anyways, I'll come back to this by the end of class and remind you about it. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump to the notes here. And if you are taking notes by hand, you can just follow along just like it would be a typical day of us together. And I will go through the quick couple slides I have. It's 3 or 4 on this idea of IQ testing. So, yesterday in class together, we discussed what intelligence even is. And one of the things we did talk about is there are these different theories of intelligence. And depending on the different theories of intelligence, you have to create ways to measure said intelligence. And a way to measure intelligence is what we call an IQ test. So, what is an IQ test? Well, IQ stands for intelligent quotient. It's a number attached to somebody's level of intelligence. So, an intelligence test is just a method that we use to assess someone's ability compared to another person's. Now, historically speaking, we talked yesterday about different theories of intelligence been around for a while. People like Terman and Binet, they were doing tests on children as well as immigrant populations back in the early 1900s. They helped develop some of the earliest forms of intelligence testing. And some of these are the ones actually we still use today. They're considered kind of the gold standard of intelligence tests today. So this would be what we call the WAIS, the WAIS. That stands for Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale. It'll be on the next slide if you didn't get that down. And then the Stanford Binet. They're the most popular types. Now, these tests, they are considered what we would say is an aptitude test. It's something that's measuring a person's potential to do something more than knowing exactly what you have learned. So, achievement and aptitude tests are two different ways we can think about testing. An achievement test is a test that measures what a person has already learned, and then they're demonstrating what they've achieved, what they've learned through, let's say, a course. So when you guys take the AP Psych exam at the end of this year, for those that are going to be doing it, that is going to be an achievement test that demonstrates that you've learned all the material that you're supposed to know. And then in theory, if you do well enough on it, you'll have achieved a score that shows that you get college credit. An aptitude test is more about looking at a person's potential. So when you take something like the ACT, it's not as much measuring like all the stuff you should be knowing necessarily as much as kind of measuring your potential as a person going forward. A placement test for college. IQ tests work more like aptitude tests here. They aren't necessarily demonstrating things you've definitely learned and proven from a current unit you're in. They're more about accessing your and showcasing your potential as a person, your level of smartness going forward, if you will. Okay. Now, with the standard IQ test, the ones that we are going to be taking today, they are meant to be similar to the Weiss and or the Stanford Binet. They ask similar types of questions. The standard IQ test is something that's been around with us for over 100 years, and it is nicely standardized and normed to an average score of 100. So I'm going to show you this chart here, and I'll go back to the last slide in a second. But here we've got the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, and it shows that 100 is considered average. I actually showed you this at the beginning of the school year, if you remember this. We use this to talk about standard distribution and normal bell curves. So when something is normally distributed, that means equal numbers are falling to the left and right of the curve. 100 is considered an average IQ. And then if you remember, we said that this number 68%, which is 34 plus 34 here, fall within one standard deviation of the mean. So what does that mean? It means that 68% of average adults, 68% of the American population is going to have an IQ score somewhere between an 85 and a 115. And if you get 100, it's considered average. Okay. Now, we'll talk more about this in a little bit. When you guys take these tests, keep in mind that you're not yet an adult, and this is an adult intelligence score. So that in mind, you got to be thinking about how you compare not just to other kids your age, but to the general population. And so if your score is a little bit lower, that's to be expected because you're still learning, you're still adding to your knowledge. Your intelligence hasn't like maxed out necessarily. Okay. And that's what we mean by mental age here. But I'm going to go back to this slide and follow up on Weiss and Stanford Binet. So key things you got to remember for the standard IQ test. 100 is average. Standard deviation is 15, right? So 68% of scores are going to fall within a range of plus 15 and minus 15 from 100. So 85 to 115. The two most common types, again, are the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, Weiss, and the Stanford Binet. And the types of questions you're going to see on these, and you're going to see this when you take your own online IQ test, there's going to be a lot of things about like similarities, like which of these words is the odd word out? Like how are these words similar to each other? Might measure vocabulary words, like what's a synonym for the word capricious? And you got to like determine whether or not you know what that word means. And that is a measure of your intelligence. It's your general knowledge. There's also going to be some abstract patterns, kind of what we saw yesterday when I was showing you examples of things, these things called progressive matrices, where you have to be able to figure out like what shape comes next based on the previous shapes and forming patterns in your head. There's also going to be a fair amount of math. So it really is kind of testing a lot of your math and English skills to a certain extent. Which again, some people would disagree with and say that's not a true measure of a person's intelligence as much as it's just measuring like school smartness. And that is one of the most challenging things about IQ tests is we don't really know if it's measuring how smart you are as much as it is just measuring the tasks that are associated with what's actually on the IQ test more than just your actual general ability. Now, speaking of general ability, it's important to note that these are designed to be given to adults within the general population. And so Alfred Binet, the guy that helped curate the Stanford Binet intelligence test, came up with what he called mental age to try to get at what a child's IQ might be and how that differentiates from their actual chronological age. So a mental age is just like how a person's mental capacity at a given age compares to the actual chronological age that they are. And you will not probably have to calculate this on an AP Psych question, but it is worth mentioning just to give you a sense of kind of how this works here. So the formula is that a child's IQ is going to be their mental age divided by their chronological age times 100. So for example, if there was an 8-year-old that had a mental age of 10, think about that for a second. We're talking about an 8-year-old kid, but he's at a 10-year-old level of ability. That means like that's a good thing in terms of his intelligence is higher than the average 8-year-old. He's more like a 10-year-old, he or she. That would mean that they have an IQ of 125. And how do I get that? If you took 10 divided by 8, you get 12.5. Multiply by 100, you get 125. Now, this formula falls apart once you get to a certain age. Frankly, I don't even know if it's worth using when you're getting to like 16, 17, 18-year-olds. It's more applicable to younger children, just as a way to draw a comparison of how one kid's IQ might compare to another. Okay. Now, this is our last slide here before you guys get a chance to mess around with one of these online IQ tests. Any good IQ test, any good intelligence test that's actually going to tell us something about a population, it's going to hopefully be standardized, reliable, and valid. So what do we mean by each of these things? Standardization is when I am comparing my score or a person's score to the general population. It's about like a percentile rank. So you might get this, for example, when you get your ACT score back or a college entrance exam back. Um, Oftentimes they'll say like where your score ranks compared to other things. If you do any kind of like standardized testing at school, I know at my old school we did a lot of what are called star testing. It'll give you a percentile rank, like you're at the 90th percent reading level. And what does that actually mean? It means that if you compare yourself to the population, the general population of people your age, and how they typically do, the average score, you are better than 90% of the rest of the population. Okay. Some of the online tests you're going to take, one of them does give you a percentile score. So this is going off of standardization here, is that hopefully we can say that this puts you into this general population and compares you that way. But scores should be standardized in the sense that you know that you're going to get the same result relative to other people, that you're going to see what ranking you get compared to those others. Reliability, this is actually a term we talked about before when it comes to designing experiments. To be reliable means that you consistently get the same results over and over again. So hopefully when you take an IQ test, if you get a score on one IQ test and you take a different IQ test and you're seeing a reliable pattern that you keep getting a score of, let's say 112, that shows that there's reliability from one test to the next to the next. So that's another element of quality testing, is there should be reliability in how that IQ score relates when you take it again and take it again and take another version of it. You should see consistency. And then validity, the last one down here, remember the word valid means true. We talked about this one already at the beginning of the school year as well. Validity means truth. And so does the test actually show us what it's supposed to measure? And so when you think about like any test, not just an IQ test, but like a test, let's say for this unit that we're going to take, the Unit 5 AP Psych exam, will the Unit 5 AP Psych exam actually show us what you were supposed to learn in Unit 5? Well, hopefully the types of questions that are on there are from Unit 5. And so this is what we call content validity, that the test's content is an actual reflection of the stuff that you were supposed to have learned through Unit 5. If it's not, if there's questions on there that don't really relate to Unit 5, or you're being graded on like your grammar when you're writing your FRQ, that's not really something we learned about. It's more of a reflection of something different. And so that's not really content valid. So good content validity demonstrates that there is what you have learned shows up on the test. And then the last term down here, I don't know if this stuff is on your screen blocking it, but it is for mine. But predictive validity, it's the idea that it's measuring future performance. So does my score on this actually say something about my future ability? So when I take, for example, a college entrance exam and I demonstrate this is my level of math that I know, what that's supposed to be doing is making a predictive statement, and if it's a valid measure of where my math ability is at, so that futuristically when I take a college course, they put me in the right one. So does it predict something valuable about my future ability? Okay. So, just some things to keep in mind as we think about IQ testing and how to take them. What you're going to do now is, with the time left, you're going to open up this worksheet. I also do have paper copies, and the sub can come around and give these out if they haven't already. And you're going to do one of two online tests here. So, you're either going to take the short or the long version of this IQ test. The short one would only take about 6 minutes. The long one is going to take closer to 20 minutes at least. It is somewhat more accurate, so I'd recommend it if you have the time, but otherwise you can take the short version, that's fine. You're going to answer a few questions about how you did, the types of questions you found easy versus hard, and then there's 2 follow-up questions that relate to this textbook reading down here. And that's it for today. So once you get this done, if you did a paper copy, you can put it in the bin. If you did it online, you can get it submitted. And then tomorrow, you're going to get another video lecture from me as we talk about other elements of IQ testing, as well as start watching a documentary together. So shoot me an email if you have questions. I should be accessible, but hopefully this all makes sense to you, and good luck.